when a guy is dealing out on tour and he has it working, right? He hits a couple shots, he's hitting to some different targets, he's on his phone, he's laughing with his caddy, there's no coach around and everything. If there's an entourage, then there's an issue.
You're entering the Pat Mayo experience.
Pat Mayo experience. Pat Mayo experience. Pat Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, running the gamut on the PGA today. Maybe even some other stuff as well, maybe some merger talk. I don't know where the conversation is going to go because we did not plan topics. Myself and Keith Stewart, who has been on the road for how long? A month? 6 weeks?
4 weeks, yes.
So it's nice to be back at home.
It is very nice to be back in the studio. The comforts of my own chair, microphone, etc. I know you know how that feels. And boy, life on the road from a technical side can get a little sketchy at times. So it's nice to know that everything works for you, especially.
Well, that's why I don't love doing, even when I saw you in Montreal, I was like, we had built this studio in an Airbnb and the audio was bad and it was bouncing off the walls. We couldn't get the right lighting. It's like, this is why I don't love going on the road with the show. I just like to be in my studio where I know that things work and it's not like half my day just trying to do that. So, well, what was the craziest setup that you had?
So, the weather got bad at Torrey, and most of the hits that I do out in the interview area because there's a nice step and repeat behind me. There's a hard line there, for shot link computers, and there's plenty of lighting for cameras and everything because that's where the guys stand after their rounds. And then, the scrum comes out, the reporters, the journalists come out and they ask them all sorts of questions. So I get to use that area, but it was pouring rain one of the days that I had to go on and do a hit. So they had me in like the corner of the media center and I took an ottoman and I flipped it on its side. And then I needed a stand for like my laptop and my camera and my microphone and everything. So then I went in the kitchen and I grabbed like a big serving tray, that someone would bring out a bunch of meals on. And I flipped that thing. And then, I had the whole thing set up. And then, the height of the ottoman was good that if I did it from my knees, then I was in a good spot. So that was pretty good.
How much did your plans change? Like not knowing where the Farmers was going to be. Did you have a good sense that it was going to be at Torrey Pines and you got to cancel hotels, move on down there? Like how much did that throw a wrench into what you have planned?
My first week on the road was the PGA show in Orlando. And by then I had gotten a text that said, Keith, get a hotel at Torrey. So I knew of at least 3.5 weeks in advance, which is kind of plenty of time with as much traveling as I do. There's a lot of times like things just come up and thankfully, I mean, it's not cheap, but you can get plenty of flights and cars and things of that nature, especially when you travel as much as I do. The status that you have, it's very helpful in trying to plan things out in an efficient manner.
I did find a new site for points for any airline in the world, and it is marvelous.
Ooh.
You can type in like, you can get the premium product. I think it's like, don't want to I'm not getting an affiliate for this. I found it yesterday. I was like, oh my God, where has this been my entire life? We can type in where you're flying from. It's like North America, South America, Europe to where you want to go. So it will have, intercontinental and then overseas flights as well. Then you can type in your airport and it will show you the flights with the lowest first class points bonuses that you can just get super cheap flights.
There you go.
No,
all right. So if
text it to you afterwards.
All right. Yeah. Text. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
If you see me promoting it on the show, it means I got an affiliate deal with them and then you should all go use it. But then at that time, who knows? So what have you seen on the road? What are we missing from what you've seen? Like, because we see the broadcast coverage, some players hit shots, but you're out there every single day.
So if you watch the broadcast, you don't see anything. Is that what you're telling me? I mean, me. We got to stir the pot a little bit. I would say the thing that I've noticed the most, and this was also said somewhat of a trend last year, is that there's always this negative talk in golf media, and it stems from the people in the media center where I'm at. They're complaining about pace of play and all these different things or whatever. But there's a lot of people there. And what I mean by that is that people are attending golf events. Like I remember back when the Tiger boom happened and it was the late 90s, early 2000s. And, golf is really popular right now. There's a lot of people talking about it. When, I'm leaving the club for the day or the venue or wherever I may be, and I go back to my hotel and someone sees my lanyard or something like that, they're like, oh, you're here for the golf tournament. I'm going on Saturday. I mean, there's just a lot of periphery discussion about golf. And TGL has helped that. Certainly LIV has spurred on a lot of conversations. I don't know that a lot of people have gone to watch LIV, but it spurred on a lot of conversations. So I would say probably the number one thing I noticed, and granted, I go to some of the better events, so I'm not there in Mexico this week, obviously, but signature events, WMPO, majors or whatever, these things are really well attended, and people are treating them almost like they're like bucket list opportunities or bro trips or they're couples trips. So I would say probably the number one thing I notice is that golf is as popular as advertised.
All of the discussion tends to be about the broadcast and tends to be about the TV ratings, but what you're trying to tell me is that people are actually like enjoying this. The fans go and they enjoy it.
The fans are having a fantastic time because at some point, some hospitality experts, and they probably don't work for the tour because these were like really good decisions that were made, but the hospitality tents and the experiences, they've turned golf tournaments into an experience, not just an event. So you could go test drive a car. You could go take your kids to like the cornhole zone and like the jungle gym. And then there's all sorts of food experiences. If you're a foodie or you like different types of like craft beers or anything, it's not just like you go and it's like your standard like Aramark, like at the stadium or the arena where, you get the $11 hot dog. It's the same at every arena throughout Canada and the US, so like every little area kind of leans into their region. And, so out there was a lot of like, Mexican style, like taco stands and restaurants and a little bit of barbecue out there in San Diego. You're up there by Pebble and they're leaning in a little bit to wine country and some different things. So each one of these little regional circuses, that we travel around to, they're really turning it into an experience and people are going and they're having a good time. Now, I can't tell you how much golf they're watching because it's tough to watch a ton of golf if you're not watching it on TV, because you only see one hole at a time, whatever, and you're walking around. But people are going and they want to be a part of the golf experience, which for you and I is a very positive thing.
100%. It's just making more fans that might try to, eventually tune into our content or do whatever. I'll let everyone know right now that I'm giving away a free membership to fantasynational.com, and that includes the leaderboard app if you are a member. And you can do that right now by leaving me in the comment section on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. Subscribe to all of those too, by the way. Smash a like while you're here. Who is going to win the Masters? Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. You drop in down there right now in the comment section or leave a rating and review along with your answer, and boom, you are in that draw for the free month. Obviously, I'm away right now, so I'll be giving away the winner on the DK show for Bay Hill. So that's what I'm doing on my end, Keith. The leaderboard app is truly awesome. I got to tell you, I'm trying to get it. I'm going to give you it after the show that I'm getting it into the hands of everyone I can because it's a game changer.
I already, because of Moose and you and everything, I use Fantasy National, right? And I got the email one time, and this was a while ago, probably towards the end of last year, I want to say, middle of last year, that the app launched and the scoring and everything. And I could tell you, I need scoring out on the golf course where there's a zillion people, as I just mentioned, it's popular to go to golf tournaments. And I want really like up-to-date scoring. And it seems like you guys are getting, whether it's the IMG Arena feed or whatever feed that you're getting is quicker than that of the one of the tour. Or whatever system is running behind it, the software, it works really well. So I basically use it every day that I'm out there in the field.
See, that's perfect. We saw the data on it. People use it on between Thursday and Saturday. The average user uses it for 3 hours a day.
I mean, I'm well above the average user, Pat, and I mean, we didn't discuss this at all, but I mean, it's not a plug or anything. I mean, the thing just works is what it comes down to. So
yeah. And that's huge. And
yeah.
like we tried to formulate it that when because I mean the PGA Tour app is fine, but you have to click on a player, click on a shot to see where he is, and then click out, refresh it, click on someone else to see if it updates. This one just updates in your hand. You don't have to do anything.
I mean, it was designed for people that share the same brain as you and I, right? Like it takes care of the things that we want. And that's not to say that a basic leaderboard on PGAtour.com isn't useful, but it would be nice if there was a tab that actually led to do what yours does, or that I don't have to go to DraftKings and use their IMG Arena leaderboard or whatever. Like I can use yours and it works very, very well. So I use it all the time. I think it's great.
And you get that fantasynational.com/Mayo to get yourself 20% off if you just want to get it right now or get inside that draw. So you're out there in the early rounds. So you're seeing a lot of people go. So who is it that you think is probably closer to doing something special, breaking through, being more consistent, that we're just not seeing because they're not Ricky Fowler, so we're not seeing a lot of bad players on TV.
Boy, I tell you, there are some of these guys. If there's one thing I think the PGA Tour has done well, it's this PGA Tour U. And if you look at some of the recent graduates of this, now, put the kid aside, put Ludwig Aubert aside, right? But Michael Thorbjornsen, that is a very, very good young player. Davis Thompson, very, very good young player. I think those guys, because Division I golf has become so competitive at the elite level, I think anyone that's in the top 2 or 3 of those guys, if you go down to the Korn Ferry, those guys are all, it's kind of like a proven marketplace of points that ranks these kids. You look at a Luke Clanton, you can see what he's able to do. I think that a lot of the next superstars aren't going to go like completely skip the Korn Ferry, but like they're going to be kind of thrust into it in a lot easier fashion than the way that they qualify. And as such, their talent merits them to be out there on tour. I tell you what, they're going to have to be that good because some of these middle of the road guys, like when is it going to be Patrick Rogers' time or Denny McCarthy's time or Bo Hostler's time? Like their time might just be gone, Pat. At the end of the day, the way the thing is structured now, with 100 cards at the end of the year, for the guys that don't normally play in signature events, there's like 50 cards left. That's not a lot of spots where there used to be probably 75 or more that were available. So you have to be a really special player. So like some people love to, like maybe like a Frankie Caput or something like that. They want to lean into some of these great stories and everything, but like you got to be a pretty special player to get and then compete against some of these veterans that are going to get one of those like basically 50 spots after the signature spots are taken because they get so many points in those elite events that if you just show up, even a guy like Max Homa or a Jordan who's struggling or Zalatoris or something like that, like just because they're in there, as long as they can stay in there, they don't get relegated, they're going to keep their spot. So I kind of like looking at those, like I said, Thorbjornsen, Davis Thompson, those are the guys that when I see them on the range, they're pretty special. And some of the young European guys too. I mean, still Aaron Rai to this day really impresses me. The Hogard twins, those guys are really good. So just some really, really fun young golfers. And like I said, the Bo Hostlers of the world and the Keith Mitchells, those guys better start grinding because these guys are good.
What about good players that are underperforming? Is it like something you can see when you're out there? Like, what's wrong with Matthew Fitzpatrick? Or is it just he doesn't got it right now?
Well, it's funny. I saw him last week at TGL, and I've seen him a couple times now at TGL live, and you could get very close there and you're watching him and he's hitting the tee shot very well. There's something wrong with his iron game. And as a result, it's put a lot of pressure on his short game. I don't think that his short game's any worse. He's just hitting far less greens in regulation. And it's tough on tour with all the pin positions and the conditions these guys play under all the time to get up and down. So a lot of his numbers have gone down, but it really stems, like I have seen him play a bunch of practice rounds with his buddies like Fleetwood and Lowry and everything. And they'll go tee off. I saw this at Pebble Beach. And he was playing with a group, like it had Lowry in it and Rory, and like they all hit off on a par 3, and it was like, and then he hit it fat, and I was like that doesn't happen. Like you don't hear that noise, and I was like, something's definitely wrong there, and it's been wrong for a while. If there's an injury, well, hey, chalk it up, put it in the suggestion box that we need an injury report. I can't tell if he's injured or not because he doesn't look like he wants to take any time off. He doesn't grimace. He doesn't do any of that. But what I can tell you is that his iron game is really off. Maybe it's trending back better. I mean, he was a little bit better at TGL last week when they beat Tiger's team, but maybe you and I and Jeff could have beat Tiger's team last week. So I'm not quite sure about that, but it basically comes down to ball striking. And it also comes down a lot to body language. Like when a guy is dealing out on tour and he has it working, right? He hits a couple shots. He's hitting to some different targets. He's on his phone. He's laughing with his caddy. There's no coach around and everything. If there's an entourage, then there's an issue, right? Like it's a huge red flag. And then I can go over with my PGA eyes and I can look at it and say like, oh, geez, this is an off the tee week. And then Max does not have the driver anywhere near the planet. Like a bunch of people were asking me about Zalatoris at Torrey. So I went and watched him on the range, and I saw 3 almost go over the net on the right. And Torrey's a pretty tight range, but it's not that tight for a tour player. I mean, they're playing 20-yard wide fairways. And then he duck hooked a couple, and I was like, yoo-hoo. I was like, all right, so what was a nice place for him probably isn't the right time to come back to this. And I think that's why it's so much fun for what I do is to be able to have conversations with you or Wiley or anyone else in the business, like when I'm out there to like give people this feedback, because at the end of the day, it's super valuable. And I think it's what the people want.
I agree. And what you're saying about Zalatoris actually makes a lot of sense. And he ended up grinding back, and I think he finished just outside the top 20 at the Genesis, the second at Torrey Pines.
Yeah.
And coming back from that sort of back injury, having to rework your swing, like it was going to take some time. I'm still really bullish on when he can figure that out. And maybe he never figures it out and never gets back to the level that you would want him to be at. But I do think that if he can solve that problem and get more into his flow, get his rhythm, that we're going to see Will back. He's someone I would want to be early on rather than late on.
Sure. And a great case study for that right now, who's probably a year ahead of him, is Daniel Berger. So Berger had to revamp his swing with the wrist and the back and everything. I mean, he used to really, really lay that thing off at the top and down cock it and create a ton of leverage, like a la like a Sergio or a Chad Campbell or somebody like that. Yet it got it really syrupy, right? And he comes down through it. And as a result, like Sergio, the guy never missed a fairway. He just hit bullet cuts all the time, right? A great wedge player, could flight it, do all those things. Well, when he came back from that injury, he had to really kind of rework a lot of things, and he didn't have that timing and kind of feel in his golf swing. But it's taken him a little over a year. But now you can see we're starting to see the Daniel Berger that reached 12th in the world, that played in a Ryder Cup, played in a President's Cup, which is kind of cool to see. And I think that Zalatoris is probably, because of the major surgery that he had, and in being just a wonderful talent, I think he's probably on a similar. I'm with you. I mean, we start heading into this season to places that are really difficult. I think it'll certainly you're going to get some great numbers on Zalatoris, and the ceiling is so high there. It definitely warrants a couple units here and there.
Did you find there was a stark difference between how Torrey Pines was set up for the Farmers and the Genesis? Because honestly, it didn't seem like it played all that differently outside of the horrible weather for Farmers. We got that like the first day at the Genesis, and by the end of it, it was great.
Yeah, I would say it played almost exactly the same. One of my weekly routines when I'm on site is that I go into the officials, whether it's a trailer or a part of a building or whatever, because it's usually near the media center, because they have to come in and sometimes they have to talk about weather or changing the rules. They're coming in and say preferred lies, whatever they might do. So I've gotten to know a couple of those guys. I just go in and say, hey, like, what's the setup this week? Which is a fair question. I'm not asking for any insider information. I'm just basically asking, like, how high is the rough? How fast are the greens? All stuff that, like, if you and I were playing in a tournament, I could ask those questions and, I wouldn't be penalized for that, right? It's basically common knowledge. So it was basically set up the same way, but when they got like almost 2 inches of rain between Tuesday night and Thursday morning, and then it ended Thursday night, like it just changed the dynamic of the golf course, and you can see it almost evolve. I wrote something about this. I mean, the golf course played on Sunday 4.5 strokes easier than it did on Thursday. So really, it was the same setup with a lot better players. And the only reason it played harder than even how hard it was at Farmers was because of the weather. And then it got easier and easier as the days went on. But to answer your question, the setup was relatively the same.
Do you like Torrey Pines? Because I see a lot of pushback that people don't like it. And me being a consumer of the PGA product, I love when they go there. I like Riv as well. But
Yeah.
the quote boringness of the architecture doesn't register with me at Torrey Pines. I like it because it's hard, and I like it because I know it. I
mean, you're going to hit one of like my trigger points for like golf media, where people just seem to complain of things about complaining's sake, right? Like it is it's almost a better piece of property than Pebble Beach. Now, you could argue, okay, maybe some of the holes could have been better designed, but I find that a lot of people that complain about Torrey Pines have never been to Torrey Pines. And it is an awesome, awesome golf facility. And if I called you up and you're in Canada and I'm over here in New Jersey, and I was like, hey, I got us 2 spots at Torrey South this weekend, you'd be out of flight. I mean, so would the people that complain like, this place is no good for a tour event. I mean, look what they do. When they have U.S. Opens there, they crown a worthy champion. We've had Rahm, we've had Tiger, we've had a playoff with Tiger. It's a tough golf course. There is a lot of vanilla to it, but there's a lot of the same par fours at a place like Oakmont, and it's not like sacrilege for me to say that. I mean, it's just a long 500-yard par four that kind of like meanders to the right with a couple bunkers at the dog leg, and then a couple bunkers around the green, and like really, really fast greens. I mean, like you could pick apart anything if you wanted to, right? It's just somebody at one point said, "Hey, I don't like Reese Jones. I don't like Torrey Pines." And then it's like pace of play. And then it just kind of escalates from there. And I'm not sure that the person who really started that argument felt that badly about it. It's like playing telephone.
You hit on preferred lies. And obviously it's a huge advantage to keep the ball in the fairway with preferred lies. Even that weird Scotty drop. I don't know if you were out on the course or if you saw it, but he was able to take his drop because he was nestled up against like a sign or something like that. And he was next to the tee box on the like hole that was next to the green that he was playing on, was able to get his drop onto the tee box. But because he got to drop it onto the tee box, he was then able to like fluff it up on a preferred lie. It was able to hit it to like 4 feet. It was awesome. So, yeah. I mean, if you had bet on Scheffler, which I had that week, and, of course, it takes me to bet on Scheffler for him not to win, but that's another story. But do you find that there are certain guys that perform much better in the preferred lies rather than play it as it lies?
Oh, well, sure. Yeah. Any guy that can't strike the ball like a Xander or a Ludwig or like your straight flushers like Rye or Hoagie or, like the guys that can really, really hit it off the deck, like your world-class players, when they're playing well, anyone would love preferred lies. They love to get their hand on the ball. Playing the ball down is as tough a test as it is holing out 72 straight holes in a row. I mean, you're going to get bad breaks. And that's kind of the essence of the game. It's that we don't play on a basketball court inside of an arena with an HVAC system to control the temperature. There could be humidity, there could be wind, there could be elevation, there could be, if you want all that kind of golf, go watch TGL. A lot of people are, right? But preferred lies are definitely going to favor. It's like if they make the greens easier, right? Everyone's like, oh, well then, like team no putt can do well. But yeah, don't forget the really good putters are going to make more putts if it's easier, right? That's like the whole juxtaposition or the irony of Augusta National is that sometimes bad putters win at Augusta and then the greatest green complexes in the world, right? Well, why? Because even the best putters have to be defensive there. But if you put the best putters in the world on a flat putting surface against bad putters, right? And I'm sure like right now when I say that, you have like 5 guys' names in their head, one of which starts with Keith, right? Not me. But anyway, the point is like you got to look at both sides of the equation. So if you give preferred lies, you're only making it easier for Scotty. You are making it easier for the guys that are worse. But if you keep it a level playing field and you get the ball where it lies, then certainly the best ball strikers, they win out again too.
Okay. Interesting. The pace of play stuff that you mentioned, people complaining about it. We've even seen like Morikawa talk about it. I think Glover was talking about it in those TGL press conferences. You see the players out there, but what do they actually think about the stuff?
In a lot of ways, it's much ado about nothing, because on the weeks where the conditions are okay, right? The weather and like a US Open or something like that exacerbates the problem, right? These guys play under the most difficult conditions for their careers. So it's going to be very difficult for me to be like, okay, hey, Pat, you normally do this show with Jeff and Tambo and the guys, and you usually do it in 45 minutes. I need you to do it in 37 and a half. And you're like, well, Keith, but I have this much content and then this many people want to watch. Like there's just issues there, right? Like, it is very, very difficult to play golf on tour. And yes, some of them are slow, but kind of it's the nature of the beast. If you make it that hard, it's harder to get the ball in the hole 72 straight times. And some of these guys just aren't as good as the other ones. And then what happens is that you throw in the weather, you throw in, outside influences, you throw in rulings like you just talked about, or grandstands and all sorts of things. And there's fans that are crossing crosswalks and everything. Is like, is this a TV product or are we worried about them just getting around faster? Because I know it didn't make Nance very happy when he had extra half an hour at Pebble and he commented under his breath to Rory right before the interview. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm late down here. I had to kill a half an hour because you finished so quick, right? Like it's kind of just mapped out that way, if we made the Super Bowl faster, like the guys who paid for their commercials in the fourth quarter, they would be like, oh, hey, wait a second. Like we want our commercials to air with the football game on, not with the trophy celebration, right? Like that was the point of what you sold us. So I think a lot of the players don't like being criticized. So they kind of fight back a little bit, but all of them would be the first ones to tell you like, it's not that I'm fine with the pace of play, but like what you're asking me to do takes a lot of time. And as such, like, what do you want me to do? Like, which part do you want me to speed up? And a big part of what, like the huge soundbite with Colin was like, the aim point thing with Lucas Glover, which, that's fine if they want to go back and forth about that. And that was kind of like clickbait anyway, right? But one of the things that Colin said is like, okay, let's have a pace of play meeting. What's the goal in all this, Pat? Do you want to make it an hour quicker? Because that's impossible. And if we make it 15 minutes quicker, then what are we doing? We're going to spend, like, we're going to tie up all this time and committees and doing all these things and put more, officials out there, and we're going to have timers and we're going to have shot clocks out there and everything. And then the whole thing's like 20 minutes faster. Like, what are we doing? So I think for the most part, the players out there, when the conditions warrant it, they'll move a little quicker. When the conditions are as difficult as what we saw at Farmers or what we're going to see at Augusta or what we're going to see, well, no one ever complains about pace of play at Augusta. And those guys are out there 6 hours, right? Because it's Augusta or the U.S. Open, or, if we get a tough setup at a place like the Wissahickon course at Philly Cricket Club, where they're having the Truist this year, the old Wells Fargo.
I've heard from a bunch of people that course is awesome.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's really good. It's really good.
Alex Blickel, who's with FTN, who came on to do the show with me, he won the Pennsylvania Amateur at that course. So he's going to do the breakdown with me once we get up there. But like, he has nothing but great things to say about that. The only thing that bothers me about pace of play, and weirdly, I think that pace of play and its issues are more of a broadcasting presentation issue rather than what's actually happening on the course. Because pace of play is no slower now than it was 15 years ago when no one complained about it. It's just there's more eyeballs in a hyper specific way on the broadcast. Now, all they need to do is cut away from the slow guy. That's all they got to do, and show us another shot. Then no one notices.
Well, it totally has to do with the cadence of the broadcast. It's a very thoughtful comment. I mean, if we were showing more full swings, more action, right? Quote unquote action drives, shots in, and not listening to 9 minutes of Greller and Spieth going back and forth, kind of slowing the cadence down. And then you show me like 6 straight, 3-foot putts that a guy made for par to stay in contention, then, I mean, that slows things down too. I mean, if we want to attack that part of it, I think it becomes more of a coverage conversation. The guys actually playing the speed that they are, I think you're right. TV could make it look whatever speed they want to make it look.
Yeah, and I've talked to a couple of people on the CBS team, because I had been making the comment, you were out there, but they just didn't show Ludwig for 2 hours on the broadcast on Sunday when they thought that he was out of it. And then even at the time, there was one par 5 that Jeff and I talked about, number 13, where he was putting for eagle. And by the time they got it back to him, he had already putted for eagle, tapped in, they cut back to Ludwig. Okay, here's Ludwig's approach on the par 5. I know that there are certain people there that aren't, even the people that work on the broadcast team are not happy about this, because it takes time out of their hands. Because when they do the tape delay stuff, it's always they probably had some sort of insightful comment on hey, here's Ludwig, here's what he needs to do. By the time that they are trying to call him on the 13th, when they cut to it live on the broadcast, they're not even on that hole anymore. They're on the next hole getting ready and watching it on a little monitor. So they're not even having the time to go through and talk through the situation. They already know what has happened with the shot. So it just takes away from the essence of the broadcast. And I know that you're not going to be able to be live with everyone, but you still need to dedicate a little bit of time. Why did we need to see Denny McCarthy line up a putt for a minute 30 when you could have had him line up the putt for 45 seconds, then allocate those other 40 seconds to an approach shot on a meaningful par 5? I think Ludwig was the only guy to get there in 2 the entire day.
I mean, I don't swear often on pods, but he hit a fucking clothesline, Pat. I mean, it was probably one of the best shots he's going to hit with a fairway wood all year. Right now, granted, the tournament wasn't quite on the line yet, but this is where he starts the birdie run, and it was never shown on TV. The better one is when he makes the putt on 15 to tie for the lead, and I got a text from somebody when the putt happened on CBS, and it was 8 minutes later. Now, to your point, whoever was calling that, Colt, it was probably Colt, because Dottie would have been with the last group, but whatever he said, here we go, guys, he's now tied for the lead. If you show that 8 minutes later, you can't use that audio, right? Because they probably showed 6 or 7 shots in between that. It's they didn't have enough cameras out there. I don't know what's going on. But I tell you, for as many people that were watching, and Josh Carpenter's already bragging on Sports Business Journal, last week about how 3 weeks in a row we had, an increase in ratings and people watching and everything, right? They kind of dropped the ball on that one. That Sunday finish could have been a much better sweat. And, we're watching Denny McCarthy line up putts.
And like I feel like the ratings have nothing to do with the actual product. I think if the product was better, the ratings would go up. But geez, really, the last 3 weeks of golf, not against football, did really well. Shocker.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah, I know. I mean,
Like
well,
I think you can draw a pretty direct line to why ratings would go up.
I mean, I'm with you. Like, I forgot. I think it was you. We were talking one time. Like, all of January should be Wednesday through Saturday. It just
Agreed.
should be on the tour, right? Like, and then somebody said that I was out on tour and I was mentioning that, and then one of the other media guys was like, well, they won't sell as many tickets. And I'm like, this is a TV product anyway. I said I think it's great. There's so many people here. And when the tour comes to town and Scotty and Rory and Ludwig are there, people will take a Wednesday off in San Diego, like, so what, but like look how much success they've had with the Farmers moving it a day and not going up against the juggernaut. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just too easy.
I get there, like especially like the local sponsors, the tournament venue, in order to make it feasible. I could see why Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is not great. You want both those weekend rounds. Remember, we were in Montreal. What was it, day one of the President's Cup? There's really no one there.
Yeah, I mean, we were there, which was fun.
We were there,
to get
and
around,
the weather was bad too, so that didn't help.
Yeah,
But day two, everyone was there.
True, and by Friday, Saturday, it was packed. It was fun. You know. I get that argument, but at the same time, like, I have zero expectations in the fall or in January for my golf betting content to be like, oh, we're gonna do record numbers. I mean, like, you're kidding yourself. Like,
you're just hoping to catch the people that are diehards, convert a few football people over, and then we're waiting for you the moment football ends and NBA goes on break and NHL goes on break, although NHL is like surging at the moment. And then all you're really competing with is college basketball on Sundays, and maybe the Duke game delays the broadcast a little bit, although TGL has gotten revenge on Duke, I think.
Yeah, well, TGL has been an interesting institution. I'm curious. We talked about this live that one Friday morning about a month ago, right around the time TGL was starting, and I'm curious to get your thoughts now, like after you've seen 9 matches total.
I really like betting on it.
Yeah,
it's really easy to bet on. It's the one thing I actually win money betting on.
Yeah, especially if you do it live.
I had this conversation with Tambo on the DraftKings show last week that I really think that underdog, because you talk to betting people just like I do. What is the one thing when you talk to like golf, and we'll talk about the ESPN bet broadcaster, because I know you got thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah.
But what do they always push on everything? What's like the one goal of all of these betting broadcasts? What the PGA higher end golf people, network people all want from betting? They all want micro betting. And I don't think it is feasible on the PGA Tour. I just don't think that people want to do it. But for TGL, I think it makes way more sense.
They have to lean into it more. And one of the big reasons that I've been to so many of those matches now, and I spent last week there, this is coming out on a Wednesday. I've spent this past week there. So I've seen,
you don't know what's happening in the future. I've seen your picks.
No, but I mean, it's just me participating and being there, right? Seeing these matches live in the arena and how these guys are learning to play this game, right? It's no different than any other game that you get taught for the first time. The first match, the Bay versus New York or whoever it was back then, right? The guys it's the same guys, but they're learning how to manipulate the sim for their own game and to win, right? And this is why, like last week on President's Day, like 3 matches in a row came down to the last swing or the last putt. 3 in a row, right? I mean, you couldn't ask for anything to be better. And they stacked the teams to try to make it fair, so that would be the case. Now, it hasn't been really working out that way. And you brought up this point. You said, I think the young guys, because they're more simulator-driven at their age and more tech-driven, they're going to be better to start with and everything. And I haven't tracked all of that. But you know what? There were guys that were really good at it first, and some of the other guys are getting better now, and you're really starting to see it get more and more competitive, which makes it fun. And I think that overall, like, being there and watching that take place, I mean, the whole adjustment to the hammer basically dropped the hammer on LIV. It killed LIV for life. So people are so much more into TGL now because the scoring is so volatile, and that's what they want to see. That I haven't had anyone ask me a LIV question in like a month, which is fantastic.
Well, there was all the talk about LIV's ratings, and it was on FS2. I think I don't understand what LIV is doing. Like, it seems like they're intentionally trying to. Well, no, just like at least before, like Live Adelaide, for example, is like the
Yep.
one gemstone of Live. Like it's something that I tuned into when it was on. It's a
Mhm.
fun watch. The players love it. The fans love it. It's really their flagship event, and they want to make it Chicago or Doral or whatever it is, but it's not.
Yep.
Like Australia has embraced this because the PGA Tour hasn't been to Australia since what President's Cup 4 or 5 years ago at this point, and they don't
Yeah.
run any sort of signature event there, which they should. Like even when they used to do that, like Kuala Lumpur, they go to like Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan. It made no sense to me why Australia wasn't a part of that as well. Like that's a big, big market for the
Yeah.
PGA Tour with so many Australian golfers. Oh, it's an English speaking country, which translates really well to the broadcast anyway. And Live really built that up and they embraced Live. And what did they do? They put it up against the Genesis Tigers tournament and then buried it on Fox the same week as the Daytona 500. Like their one bullet that they had, they just shot up into the air.
Yeah. They're a baffling crew, you know. I mean, I'll just use the comparison because of my recency bias. There was an issue with the hammer.
Yeah.
Golf, smart golf, thoughtful people made a decision to change it, right? And they probably looked at a lot of different scenarios and did it. In the live world, it's like, hey, we want shorts. Here we go. Like it didn't affect it. Their changes that Live has made in the last 3 years hasn't made it any better or worse. It's the same, and it's not drawing any attention. So I guess that's worse. It's plateaued. Whereas you look at what's happened in the last 2 weeks with the advent of the new hammer rules, how much more people are watching or into, or I can't tell you the number of people on President's Day. I was there for 3 straight matches. I'm getting all these text messages from people that never watch golf, that are just friends and family of mine. They're like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, when did this start? And I'm like, well, like a month ago, but like, who cares, right? Like, so I have so many questions. Like, whichever live leader would sit down with the two of us, I would have so many questions. Like, why did you come? Now, more of mine probably would be like towards the golf side of things because of my background, but like, I just don't understand why they do some of the things that they do.
Do you like TGL? Like, besides being there, like as a product, do you think it's good?
I think the foundation of what they're doing is pretty solid. I think they're going to, in the next year or two, I think they need to stay away from the celebrity side of things because people watch golf because it's aspirational. They want to see people hit shots that they can't hit. Right. So I think if they want to do something fun, they would invite Nelly or Lexi or something like that, or maybe, like a really like up and comer junior player or a collegiate athlete or a European player. I'm not into like Steph Curry competing against Ludwig. Like, I just don't see that as being something that's going to take off. But I think the foundation they've built and the think tank that's down there, I think they're doing the right things. A better question is like, how long could TGL last? Right. But for right now, I think it's heading on a good trajectory and I like it.
Season's probably a bit too long. Like, I don't necessarily want to see it till the end of March. I think 2 months is probably good enough. And I think it's in the right time slot. It has no expectations, is what I think that is what people have enjoyed about it. Like, there's people who are like, I don't like sim golf. It's fine. You don't have to watch it. But
Yeah.
the fact that it is annihilating live stateside in terms of interest, like
Yeah.
really was the hammer on live. Like now the other thing to talk about is TGL. And I think that their influencer strategy did really good because I know that when live first started, like they were paying people like bots on PGA probably does the same thing too, but it was very noticeable
Probably
with
not,
live that they were paying people to tweet about it. And TGL, I mean, I get paid by TGL to talk about TGL, not like right now, but like the mid-roll ads that you see and like do a segment each week on TGL. And now I'm doing that beyond it because it has captured my interest. But it's the same thing that Feinberg always said with clubs in like the new school of advertising. Like, why would I pay John Rahm to hit Callaway clubs billions and billions of dollars when I could go to the good guys, put them in their hands? They'll sell more product than John Rahm is going to.
Oh my God. So I'm out the Pro-Am Day Wednesday at Waste Management WM Phoenix Open. And the group is JT and everyone's talking about JT. I know there's going to be a lot of content conversations about JT. It's Wednesday morning. I want to go and see what JT's got going, right? He wasn't great at Pebble. So I'm watching him. In his group is Michael Phelps and Grant Horvat, right? We have the greatest Olympic athlete the world has ever seen. We have JT, who is a top 5 most popular American player at a popular event. And it was like you and I were the other two guys in the group. Nobody paid attention to either one of those guys. It was unbelievable. It was like I was walking with golf Jesus. This kid, and he couldn't have been more genuine, more nice and everything. And to your point, I'm just trying to validate your point. Like the TaylorMades of the world turned around and said, I'm going to give this kid a sponsorship deal, and I'm going to go drop Tommy Fleetwood or something, or DJ, because no one watches LIV, right? Like to kind of compare apples to apples there.
But it's
second.
not even a LIV thing. It's just, I think that people consume, like, there's a lot of talk about the YouTube type content. Now it's like, oh, well, no one's watching the PGA because they're watching YouTube content. It's like, that's not true, because there's no stakes with the YouTube content. It's fun to watch and people will consume it. More people. People love watching Bryson try to break 50 with whoever he's playing with that week. That's cool content, but there's no real stakes on the line. That's why major championship golf, PGA Tour, actually competing against the best is always going to win through. That's why more money will be diverted there. Even when it comes to something like selling clubs, these guys who are not like, I could give Rory any club and he's going to be awesome. I don't see why, because he plays a particular brand that I need to play it. At least these guys on YouTube, they're all amazing golfers. It'd be like putting you on YouTube. Like you're a PGA professional. You're not me. You know what I mean? But if I saw you on YouTube doing it, it's like, oh man, Keith uses this club. And Keith got like an extra 10 yards of distance from this driver. Like maybe I can get to 8 yards of distance from that driver. But if Rory's doing it, like I'm never going to hit it anywhere. I have no comparison with Rory. Where at least I feel, although I do have no comparison with these YouTube guys, people feel that personal connection with them and they would buy the club because they use it.
I mean, we both have an affinity for capitalism. When I owned my own golf shop, you better believe whatever was in my golf bag that I played with and went out with members was for sale in my golf shop, right? As soon as I went and hit it, I mean, I could guarantee, every single time I'd go out and play with 3 members, when I came in, somebody was getting a club fitting. Or they were like, hey, I love that shirt, or those shoes look really good, or whatever. I mean, like, it's funny how golf is such a late adoption sport. We're just figuring that out now, right? Like it's one of the most golf things I've heard in the last 6 months was that when the PGA Tour went out and they created the Creator Council. Now, not the classic, not the event, right? But they are enlisting the help of these creators in order to help market their brand better, right? The NBA did that in 1998. That's like the most golf thing I've ever heard, right? It's absolutely classic. The idea that, when you think about it, like leagues like that are, through the roof popular, like the NBA, like the NFL, they were leaning into sort of these sort of things years ago. And what TGL has done in letting influencers in there, inviting them in there and letting them use their content on their own platforms is no different than you inviting Grant Horvat onto the show in order to get his followers to watch a Pat Mayo show, right? And the tour doesn't do that. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to start to do it a little bit more and more, but like that is the key to the kingdom. And I'm not saying Phil Mickelson was right, but like letting these guys promote the tour from their own brands only helps promote the tour. And closing the door to all of that is the opposite of what TGL's done. And look how fast they've spiked on social media.
Well, I mean, just to go back to your NBA point, when I was in broadcasting school, we would have to put together highlight packages. And obviously we didn't have the rights to anything. We were just learning how to do all this stuff. And we could do, editing projects, features, whatever it might be. And the only league that you could actually get viz to easily was the NBA, because they basically said, hey, use whatever you want from our like copyrighted material on YouTube. Show off the best dunk, show off the best plays. The more people see this, the better it's going to be for us. And to your point, PGA, I think just last week, like I've been banned on Twitter for 2 straight days because I posted like something I took off my TV on the PGA Tour of a good shot. It wasn't even the Keith Mitchell slamming and stuff. It was someone like making a really long putt. They're like, no, copyrighted material, you're banned for 2 days, whatever it is. Like, I'm trying to promote your product here. Like, what are you thinking?
I tell you, it's well, welcome to the club, Pat, man. If you haven't had something pulled down, then you're just not doing it right covering the tour. That's for sure. I mean,
are you surprised that there's not like beyond like with all the big creators, are you surprised there hasn't been like, they keep doing the match, no one cares about the match. Why not do like a major tournament for these guys?
Because they already do it and they already get paid. So if they enlist the tour or TNT or anything else, there's going to be more hands in the cookie jar, right? These folks are making more money just running around playing golf matches that, in your words and in my opinion, don't really have any consequence, right? But they're great entertainment. In my mind, they're no different than Landman and Yellowstone, or Succession, whatever you like to binge watch, right? People go on there, they watch a bunch of these things. Now, Bryson hitting doing a challenge every day is more of a marketing strategy, but a lot of these rounds where the different creators play against one another, or they grab a tour pro and they jump on. Think about that, right? Just for a second. Max Homa is going to go jump on with Bob Does Sports, right? And they'll create their own content and they'll sell that and they'll make a bunch of money off of that. But, Max can't do that with his own game on when he's in tour coverage, right? So look what the tour has done to drive those players to go do that in other areas. And now they've totally missed the boat to the point where they're going back to those folks and saying, okay, well, we'll allow you to start doing this now. But at what point are they going to let the players actually use their brands to maybe they could give the tour some pit money because they would actually promote the tour.
Did you think that 3 years later, I know you kind of touched on it, that Phil was kind of right about all this?
It's two sides to Phil. He's the smartest guy in the room all the time. And then, Phil he's also the smartest guy in the room all the time, right? In my mind, when he was going through all of that process, it seemed very rushed. It seems like things kind of snowballed past his timeline and it got way out of control. That Riviera where the DJ announcement came out, the Bryson, the famous white words on black background. It's I'm pledging my allegiance to the tour, whatever it may be. Right. And then obviously that all went away anyway, but it seemed like it got outside of his control, but that was the whole thing with the Tiger match that he played, at Shadow Creek for $9 million or something, the real big first one that they did, right? And he couldn't get the rights to any of that in order to help market his own brands. And he's like, man, I'm the only one playing with Tiger, and I think that kind of that riff I'm sure was going on long before that, but there's a lot of what he was pushing for. They're getting closer and closer to doing so. In a lot of ways, he had a good point.
Welcome to the TGL presented by SoFi, golf's newest league. It's sharp. It's electric. How sharp is it? How electric is it? Good questions. Try this on for size. 2 hours of hammer, dropping, overtime, forcing, playoffs on the line, golf. With 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour, split into 6 teams. Atlanta, Boston, Jupiter, LA, New York, and the Bay Golf Club. This isn't your average Sunday pickup game. Tune in to TGL Monday or Tuesday night only on ESPN. Claim yourself a seat for the first season of TGL now. Keep up. It's golf.
Do you think that a merger is imminent? And what do you think a merger looks like with LIV?
Ooh. Boy.
I think those are two separate things.
Totally.
LIV having a TGL team would be a lot of fun, for one thing.
Yeah.
And I thought that because the contracts of Bryson and Brooks are coming up soon with LIV, they'll probably re-sign them to an ungodly amount of money. But let's say they wanted to come back. What's the punishment, quote unquote, to come back? Obviously, there probably shouldn't be any. I theorize that maybe utilizing those bigger LIV guys, their quote punishment is they have to go play some of the lesser tournaments, like commit to playing in a Mexico Open, a Wyndham Championship. Some of those tournaments that never get any rub, they have to do 1 or 2 per year for 2 years or something.
Well, this could be a pod in and of itself. I could say this much for being out on tour and seeing the body language and hearing directly from the sources. I mean, Jay was at Torrey 2 weeks ago. So Jay Monahan spoke to the media and answered a bunch of questions about his meeting with the president. He and Adam Scott met with the president. Although Tiger signed the letter, Tiger was not at that first meeting. They've subsequently had more meetings. The Donald wants the PGA Tour to be the tour. Why? Because it's America's tour, right? So he is selfishly pushing to make all of this come back together. And they keep calling it reunification, but it was never really unified. So you can't something. It's really just unification. But semantics aside, with Trump having direct access to Yasser's boss, and these were Rory's words out at Torrey. Rory was like, he could call Yasser's boss and say, we're done with this. This thing needs to come together. We want the best players Trump says, I want the best players in the world playing together on our tour, right? and they could work all of that out. I think it's going to happen very quickly. Someone asked me the other day, they said, how fast do you think this will happen? Kind of like you're asking. I said, I think Bryson will play in the Players. And they were like, whoa. And I was like, it's kind of hyperbole, but it wouldn't surprise me if the whole schedule was changed next year and all of these guys are back together. I think it's going to happen very quickly now that, Trump's involved and they're having meetings all the time. And I mean, the major sticking point is that guys like Cantley and Tiger don't want those guys to come back for free. That's what it comes down to. They're not blocking the merger. And if the government, if the United States, we have different governments, but if the United States government was blocking it, the Department of Justice was blocking it prior to Trump, that's not going to get blocked anymore, right? So that's no longer a concern. In my mind, reading the tea leaves, it was always about that guy took $150 million. He's not coming back here because I didn't get that money. Whether you're Scotty or you're Cantley or and Tiger's a big, obviously that's his biggest sticking point. I built this tour, and then you guys all left and took all this money. I could have got, Tiger could have got $750 million to go. And he turned it down in order to preserve the tour and his legacy, right? But now look what's happening.
If that was of the utmost importance, the $750 million didn't make a blip to Tiger based on how much money he has, and he was worried about the legacy of what would happen to the tour if he had went. Isn't him being the great unifier even better for his legacy?
I mean, that's a good question. Only Tiger can answer. He's a very, very proud individual who's been through a lot of ups and downs in his life and his career. I mean, he's had some low points and some high points. There's no doubt about that. Man, that's a great question. I'll just go back to the first kind of A-B question you had. I don't think anyone has an idea of what the merger will be yet. I think it's going to be an influx in money. I think LIV will stick around for a little bit. I think the tour is going to accept players back, and I think they're going to be back sooner rather than later.
Okay. Do you think like LIV continues with this like team format? Like, does LIV exist in 2 years? The tour itself.
I mean, really, that would be a great question for, hey, DJ, hey, Brooks, hey, Phil, hey, Bryson, do you want to carry this tour, or do you want to play 7 times a year or 8 times a year over on the PGA Tour? You got your bag of cash, and now you're back. We have $20 million purses. You're some of the best players in the world, and you get to play all 4 majors and get official world golf ranking points. I mean, I think it's going to be up to the players ultimately. This summer is going to be a really kind of pivotal moment with those 3-year contracts coming up, because you're going to have Bryson, Cam Smith, DJ, Brooks, all of those original contracts that came out that summer. I mean, when's the last time LIV signed a significant player?
Wrong.
So like if those guys aren't re-upping, and now all of a sudden, for all the ineptitude that the tour showed in the first 2.5 years of this, the longer it carries out, the more those guys are kind of left with geez, I feel pretty irrelevant over here. What do you think John Rahm feels like?
Bryson's the only one who's not irrelevant right now. Like Brooks becomes relevant at majors when he plays well, but then no one thinks about him when he plays poorly.
Yeah. But Bryson's only relevant because he hits balls over his aquarium, his house.
And he won the USO, and he turned himself Bryson's going to ride a wave of popularity and unpopularity because he's a weird guy. And right now he's kind of at the peak of how popular he's going to be. And it's going to flip on Bryson. Part of the good thing about him going to LIV is that he gets away from Rory suffers from being on camera way too much and being asked to speak for the tour so much. It's always the point that I try to make is that people call Rory a choke artist in major championships because he comes second and third a lot. If he simply just missed the cut in all these majors, no one would actually say that about him. They'd be like, oh yeah, Rory hasn't contended in a major in a while, but he's got 4 majors. That's really good. Not a guy, he should have 20 majors, but he sucks. It's like, well, that's a really weird way to spin a guy who's in the final group of all these things. Now, it's not great that he keeps blowing it at the end, but he's there at the end every time. And with Bryson, the more we got to know him the first time around, the more people started to hate him. But on LIV, he's able to, no one watches it, so no one cares about that. And what they see of him is highly manufactured. It's all edited. It's not live. All of those parts of Bryson that people don't like, we don't get to see anymore. You put him back on the PGA Tour, people start to see that again, and I don't think he's quite as popular.
Have you ever seen a reaction on TV in real time that more encapsulated the way that most of the fans felt than when Brooks rolled his eyes at Kiowa and Bryson walked by and he was like, oh my God, this guy again, right? Like that's how everyone, to tie a bow on what you said, that's how everyone felt about Bryson at that time. The constant scrutiny doesn't always promote people positively, for
No,
sure.
and listen,
You
he's
know.
probably matured since that time to learn from his mistakes in terms of being affable to people or just not being so strange. And it was funny because his honesty got him into a lot of problems too. Like when he's like, "Yeah, the Masters is the par 67," then he misses the cut. It's like, "Oh, okay,
Oh yeah.
Bryson, thanks." But I mean, I get the point that he was trying to get to, but maybe people weren't ready for it at that time. But just being able to cultivate your own image and have control of the rights, the messaging, it can really promote you in a certain way where once you are back on tour, you lose all of that. At least, even if they do give up some of the coverage things and they can utilize and promote their personal brands through the PGA Tour, that would be one thing, but you still can't hide from the cameras at the same time either.
You definitely can't. And not to just go like completely in a different direction, but I don't know how long you want to talk today. I'm happy to talk to you forever about golf. I love whiteboarding this stuff with you, but we got to talk about the betcast at some point because
Let's
for
do it
you
right
and
now.
I,
Because
yeah, I mean,
you were texting me live from Phoenix, being like, "What is this?" I couldn't watch it. I was in Canada, but I could almost tell you exactly how it went. And it's the same as the last time they ran it out. All it does,
oh,
they forget that the only people that would ever tune into a betting cast would be people who bet on it anyway. Simply calling it the betting cast alienates so many people off the hop anyway. And weirdly, the betting cast should be the best of the broadcast because what bettors want to see is not what they're giving us. And like I talked to Kevin Clark. I didn't talk to him afterwards, but he hosted on the Friday. I was like, this is what people have problems. And he's just like, they're telling us what to do. Like we can't like freestyle on this. Like we have to call the shots that they tell us, be at the hole that they tell us. But it's just sort of the antithesis of what golf betting is all about. It's a broadcast run by people who have never bet on anything in their lives, and that's a problem.
well, my first question was, who's the customer for this? Like, who's the consumer? So to elaborate on your point, right? So everything that they said basically took for granted a certain baseline of knowledge about betting. So if you were a novice bettor and you turned that on, you had no idea what they were talking about, right? The numbers that were on the screen and everything. So that instantly that person is disenfranchised. And then if it was an actual bettor or a sharp person and they were watching this, it'd be like, well, this doesn't really mean anything to me because this isn't the way that I bet. Right. So then that person was turned off. And there's nobody in the middle because we haven't established this market yet. Like there's no middle class bettor in golf, right? Like there's novices and then there's people that have been doing it forever, before it was legal. So it's like that started on fantasy and everything. So I kind of like when I spoke to the powers that be there afterwards, I was just like, who was that for? I'm just curious. Like, because you own your own business, I own my own business. Like, if you don't start with an idea, like a problem and a solution, but also like, who's your consumer? Who's your customer? Like, who are you catering to? If there is none of those people, like maybe you should come up with a better problem solution, right? Like, I just don't I don't get it. And the micro betting thing, nobody would just sit in one spot and then just like be force fed what they have to bet on. And I don't know. My biggest question is I don't know why they're so anchored to coverage. You and I could do a live betting show that would be extremely compelling, and we could have a monitor in our studio, right? And all we need is an odds board and the ability to talk to the audience. We don't need to show the coverage. Everyone knows what's going on the golf course. They want to know what to bet on. And then we could create all sorts of scenarios where we could chase first round leaders, or we could go end of round leaders. We could talk about head to heads that are going on throughout the golf course. We could talk about live betting on a Sunday afternoon of, what's happening in the sweat, top tens, top five placements, like who's going to cross the barrier, who's collapsing. I mean, like all of that theater would be so good. And yeah, it'd be great if you could show it in coverage, but like we almost don't even need it. And they were so anchored to those holes. And they were like, well, that's where the cameras are for the featured holes. I go, well, then move the cameras. Like I was like, this is not rocket science. I was like, man, oh man, we are missing the boat. And you and I have like, I can't, this is like the NBA 1998 thing. I was texting you like a tirade. I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are you doing? And you finally I came up for air, and then you goes, it's not on in Canada. I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
it'll get there. The fact that they're doing it, I
It'll
think,
get
is a
there.
positive. The one problem with that is when you launch something like this and it's so ultimately unsuccessful that they might scrap it completely, which we absolutely do not want. And I'm not saying support it, even though it sucks, but we need to work, like, they need to improve it every time it gets run out. I think this is one of 6 times they're going to be doing this. And just the whole, this is where the cameras are, like, that's not true at the same time. Like, why can't, maybe I'm crazy here as someone who used to work in a control room with monitors and know how to switch cameras at the same time. Let's say you gave me access to every single one of the feeds that's going on right now. So you have your featured hole groups, you have the cameras that are out there. And even if it was just like the 5 separate feeds that they run anyway, I could make a broadcast out of that pretty compelling, just jumping from hole to hole and using split screens and talking over it the entire time. Therefore, I don't need to be stationed at a single hole. I can utilize all of the cameras from across the course on these feeds that are happening anyway to do the betcast. That is the way they need to do it.
I mean, I celebrate that it happened with you, right? And I'm very excited about the future. I'm a little more bullish in the moment about TGL and their meteoric rise in the immediate.
Well, Meteor, the fact that it's not a disaster is a big win for them.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, well, look, we all compare it to LIV, and 3 years in, less people are watching LIV and are interested in it than they were in the beginning. So, I mean, at least TGL's kind of captured that crowd.
TGL's background noise on a weekday night is what it is. And if you want to bet, it's there to bet on. I usually just watch it without sound, like I'm doing stuff in the house and it's on. And there's always shots, which is nice. And I don't want to be misconstrued about the shots. I want to see more shots. LIV kind of goes too far the other way with it. They go shot, which is kind of nice, but there's no context behind any of those shots, which is a bit problematic. And a lot of it has to do with that they play the course out of order. Like you have no geography. Like you can't place yourself on the course of where people are at. So there's no context to a lot of these shots. Like, oh, do they have the hard stretch coming up? Do they have the easy stretch coming up? It's like, what the hell is hole number 7? And like, how many do they have left to play? Like, once you have to start doing that calculus in your mind, it takes away from it. So, and they probably show too many shots in rapid succession. They could let it breathe a little bit more to add that context. But I do think that the LIV broadcast itself is far superior to the PGA one. They just need to dial it back a little bit, while the PGA one needs like hyper focus a little bit more.
Somewhere between those two is a good thing. Another question. I've got a quick question for you, right? Yeah. 2021 Whistling Straits.
Mm-hmm.
There's all this conversation about the Ryder Cup, what direction the U.S. team is heading, what direction, the European team keeps winning and their record over the last 25 years, blah, 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 this, that, the other thing, but they're getting older, right? They get smoked by the U.S. And then all of a sudden, we go over there to Rome and we get smoked. And now all of a sudden, if you look at Bethpage, now I'm a homer. I'm still thinking that, having Scotty, a healthy Xander, a lot of the good, young American stars that are still pretty young, Cantley and those guys. But like, you start to look at that European side that they're building, right?
It's
and maybe this is a little bit of recency bias, but when you start looking at like those guys are studs, man. Like Victor Hovland could be left off this team. And when you think about that, I mean, it won't happen, but he could, but like, when you think about, some of these guys, the Hogard twins, Bobby Mack, you pair these guys up with Rahm and Rory and Hatton and Fleetwood and everything. Like, man, all of a sudden, like, where it was like Ian Poulter left the room and Lee Westwood and everyone's like, oh, woe is me. It's like, I think the smartest guy in golf might be like Luke Donald, either that or the luckiest guy, because, man, they look stacked to get ready. They look like they have a bunch of options. And if we did a segment in this, like buy or sell at this point in their career, and I'm rattling off Max Homa, Cam Young, all of our like quote unquote Rome guys or whatever, you'd be like, Keith, I don't know, like, has Wyndham Clark reached his peak? All of these guys that like we're kind of counting on to fill that 6 to 12 role, rather than roll out Denny McCarthy and Patrick Rogers or something, or Mab McNeely, who's like 7th in the standings right now.
I wouldn't be. I think a lot of it is due to recency bias because Europe was dead after Whistling Straits, and all of a sudden they win once in Europe where they always win. It's like, oh my God, Europe can't be beat. Look how bad the U.S. team is. It goes in ebbs and flows. Luke Donald, I think, did some good work with the pairings and selecting the team, but he also got incredibly lucky that all those vets retired and the young guys that he picked turned out to be really good. And a lot of their superstars age into becoming superstars around 2 years ago, like even something like taking Ludwig at the time, like getting him that experience. I always believe in that, like getting guys experience. That's why I was actually kind of shocked that Thigala didn't play more when we were at President's Cup, like especially after they took the bigger lead. Like get him out there and like get him these extra reps because you don't care about the President's Cup. You're going to win anyway. You want these guys prepped for the Ryder Cup. That's why, taking Keegan didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like take Akshay. Get him out there. Like, get out guys that you think could be a part of your future. If Keegan is a part of your future of the Ryder Cup, you're going to lose every time. Unless he's the captain, which he is now.
Yeah, I was going to say he's a big part of it right now. But
like, you don't want him out there as like a guy playing 3 times.
Well, yeah, this whole argument like he's going to be a playing captain was the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard of.
Listen, if he plays himself onto the team, good for him. If not, you're not playing, pal.
Even then, it's turned into such an event. I mean, we're going to one of the biggest markets in the world with the biggest event in golf at what maybe its peak, or who knows, but certainly that event continues to get more and more popular, right? I mean, this might be its ultimate peak. New York City, Bethpage Black, great golf course, 2 teams that have young and old, like really, really popular people. The LIV guys coming back. Because you got to have a Bryson on that team. Maybe Brooks does some damage this year and he gets on that team too. There's just so much that's going to be going on there. How can a captain possibly, like, at the same time work on his game and come up with all of the other things like the dinnerware they need to, like, send the wives? I just don't. I don't know. Like I don't even have that. I know the media just loves to make up great stories, but like that one to me, like, just never held any water. I was like, if that guy is playing on that team, then we lose. It just can't be.
And even dropping some of the guys at the bottom end, like if Wyndham Clark doesn't get his game coming around, you have to leave him off. Max Homa can't simply be on the team because people like him. And Spieth and Justin Thomas, Justin Thomas will probably be on the team this time around because he is playing better, but like Spieth and those guys, if eligible, if they are not playing well, you can't be like, well, they've been on the team 5 times. We got to take them. Like, I find that's where the U.S. will get themselves into more problems than anything else, rather than say like, hey, Michael Thorbjornsen just won twice, like during the summer. Like, let's take him.
He won the Deer and the Rocket back to back.
Yeah, I could see that happening, but like, why wouldn't you want to roll out this Super Bombers 21? Like, maybe this guy could be the next guy for you, rather than these guys who may have peaked, maybe not, but they don't have it right now. Like, let the guys play themselves onto the team. Like, McNeely would be on the team right now, even as a captain's pick with the way that he's playing.
Oh, sure, yeah. And I was never a big fan. I was always a good, like, I like the 10-2. I never liked the 6-6. I always felt like
that is solely for golf media.
Yeah.
For something to talk about.
Yeah, it creates eyeballs for sure. There's no doubt about that.
And the way that the European system is set up, I suppose you could have a fringe guy sneak in through Euro points alone, but they've done enough good work between like majors and like the combined tournaments to make sure that I was going to say Jake Paul. That's not his name. Yannick Paul doesn't like sneak onto the team through the back door with an automatic spot on the European team. But they've always seemed far more cutthroat with who they want to take and who they don't. And even when they did rely on Poulter, like Poulter was really the only guy they did that with. Just like, he's a performer. He's the nuts under pressure. But like when McDowell got too old, that was the end of him. When Westwood got too old, that was the end of him. They didn't feel obligated to take these guys, and they made room for the younger guys.
What's the best thing you've seen in golf so far this season, 2025?
Best thing. My happiest moment is when Potgieter birdied 1 in the final round of the Farmers, and I thought I was going to win like a 600-1 bet, and then he was like 10 over the rest of the round. That was the most excited that I got so far. You know what it was, honestly? And I think this speaks to why, obviously he was going to get the invitations to the signature events anyway. Spieth from behind that fucking cactus in Phoenix was the most excited I've been in golf. Like, oh, Spieth's back.
Spieth's back. You realize that when he finished like whatever it was, T6 there last year, every other tournament in 2024, he didn't finish within 12 shots of the lead.
No, but he obviously he ended up with the wrist problem, and
Yeah,
like
of course.
it was
He had
like
it for
well
2
known
years.
the entire time. But he is so exciting for golf, like
Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of star power, in terms of ratings, in terms of interest, because he really does seem like a weekend hacker who's like the best version of that at this point. Like no one, I don't think anyone lives under this like impression that he's going to get back to number one in the world. It's never happening. If he sniffs the top 10 again, I would be shocked. But he can be competitive at like one major a year and make a run at Valero or Phoenix or something like that, then that's exciting enough for Spieth. Just to be in the mix and be conversationally good, I think is really good for golf.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's definitely, I mean, all of us out there, we root for Spieth all the time. He is, after Tiger, he's the needle mover for sure.
And then he's it. That's it. He's the only one.
Bryson. Those two will do it. Yeah. Well, Bryson. Yeah. But Bryson's just non-existent unless it's a major. And then there's so many stories surrounding that. There's, kind of almost helps Bryson that he kind of gets, muted a little bit for big time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bryson's at a good point now that you miss him and you like to see him at majors. And that's a good spot to be in. I mean, Rory is kind of a needle mover, but not really. I assume he's a far bigger needle mover, like in Europe and overseas, than he is in America. But he's obviously a draw, just like Scheffler is a draw. But Spieth is just a different level. It's like if Ricky was good.
If Ricky was good.
Like, remember when Ricky was in contention at LA Golf Club for the US Open? Like, that was the story. It wasn't that Rory was going to win a major or Wyndham Clark was like in the lead. It was like, oh my God, like Ricky might win a major.
In LA, in Hollywood. Yeah, that thing was scripted really well. It was.
Until Wyndham Clark won.
Yeah. Wyndham Clark.
I'll leave you with this.
All right, hit me.
Early master stuff.
Okay.
How serious should we take Ludwig after coming in second last year? Like, should he be one of the 3 favorites?
Yes.
Scotty, Rory, Ludwig? Rahm?
I've seen a lot of really good content talking about how good of a player Rahm was. And then when all of the Ludwig, first 30 starts of his career, first 40 starts of his career, all those things come up, Rahm's always ahead of him in Ludwig's ascent, right? Like, there's so it's got to be the 4 of them, really. I think Rahm's he had a very, very bad year when it comes to majors last year. And he capped it off with a really strong Royal Troon, and he showed his true Rahm self. Like he finished top 10 and he was on the opposite side of he was on the bad side of the draw. So I think Rahm needs to be included in that conversation, but those 4 guys going into the Masters we should be able to get 2 of those 4 in contention on Sunday afternoon. And probably one of them's named Scheffler, but yeah, it's going to be good.
And Bryson being up there as well. He'll be up there on the odds board. I know that he was the first round leader last year on a wet surface. I think if conditions are nice, Bryson has little to no chance at Augusta. He just has no touch, and you need touch.
I've always said that having single length irons, chipping around a place that is that demanding, with a sand wedge and a lob wedge or a gap wedge or whatever his lofts are and alignments, God knows what, with the length of a 6 iron is got to be really, really awkward and hard. So yeah, I don't like the fact that he, carried the cross across the fairway last year and came in whatever it was 8th. Might be, for years when we're doing content would be, oh, I remember that year he came in 8th. Yeah, it started out wet and then he held the sign and that might be a peak for him. But the next 2 majors are right in his wheelhouse, big time.
Absolutely. And anywhere where it's driver heavy. I mean, he'd be great at this Mexico Open, but it would be like when they go back to St. Andrews, I think that he's live.
Yeah, just those 2 back-to-back. You have to be a really good putter at both Quail. That's kind of the secret sauce at Quail that no one ever really pays attention to is you have to be a bomber, but you also have to be a really good putter, and you're obviously gonna have to be a good putter at Oakmont. So just back-to-back, his ability to bomb and the way the USGA keeps setting these things up, it'll probably just be Rory and Bryson again. Ludwig's got speed.
Yeah,
He's got plenty of speed.
Ludwig was there last year until he found that bunker and made like a quad or whatever it was.
Yeah, I bet that didn't work out. But
so we throw Bryson in there. Is there anyone from that next, from any of the levels down? I bet the only Masters bet I have right now is Akshay at 100-1, just because I believe in the power of lefties at Augusta, and I love Akshay. I would love to see him win the Masters. I don't think that he's going to win, but I would love him to win. But is there anyone kind of in between? You'd be like, oh, that guy's actually playing better than Hideki keeps coming up to top of mind for me. Like he fits that criteria. He's already won. And he's already won the Masters, obviously, but he's already won this year.
Yep.
He's had a really strong like tee to green game, and his putters let him down a few times since. But if he can just get like hover around and keep lingering by the time we get to Augusta, he might be kind of forgotten about at that time. And then boom, he wins.
I'll give you two other names. Number one, if you believe in, Spieth's sorcery around Augusta, he's like 38 and 40 right now. So like, now's the time to buy, because the more events you let go by and he contends in these signature events that he's playing in, or God forbid that, he has a couple of top fives and stuff. That number is going to get as low as it can get because of his history there. And then the other guy is that I feel like in some ways Terrell Hatton fits the Danny Willett, Sergio, like Charles Schwartzel pop up out of nowhere because he's that good a player. Now, I know Hatton hasn't always been great there, but he's got the game. He's a great putter, great long iron player, really solid ball striker, well above average with his short game. And he's, a lot of people don't realize Terrell Hatton's 8th in the world right now.
Oh, yeah. No, people don't realize how good he is. I think that there's something in his mind about Augusta. And if he was going and like it severely impacts him from his upside of what he can be, he just gets too mad at that place because it's unfair. I think that he would need a Danny Willett, Zach Johnson type of year where the conditions are bad. And then he could win. I think if it's neutral conditions, he has no chance.
Yeah.
Like
but
I
in the
like
middle,
him at the U.S. Open. I like him at the PGA. I like him at the Open. But he's another one of those guys. I look at the Masters and like things really have to break right for you to win this. He has the talent, absolutely. But at a neutral event where weather doesn't play a factor, be it windy, like I think that wind helps him more than rain does, because rain would help out the bigger hitters like Bryson. Not to say that Hatton is short off the tee, but he's not prodigiously long like some of these guys. That if a lot of wind came into it, really utilizing his skill set and the way that he can flight the ball, then you would see Lowry, Hatton, like Fleetwood, like those type of guys persevere a little bit more. Like that would be their best chance to win.
Fairway Jesus. Yeah. Imagine all the guys that have tailed him for so many years if his first win was a major and nobody was on him because it's Tommy Fleetwood. Right?
I thought that would happen to Finau for years, and then he finally ended up winning like some scrub events. But like he just contends in all these things, and everyone bets him at like 12-1 at Detroit, which he ended up winning eventually. The Mexico Open, whatever it is, but like, he'll just win like the U.S. Open one year.
Yeah, if you go back to Portrush, where we're going to be for the 4th major this year, Tommy was there, and that's probably going to get nasty.
Do you think that like everyone kind of forgets how bad though? Like it was so wet the last time that it was at Portrush. Like I'd be curious to see what that course plays like without like a torrential downpour.
Yeah, that would be great. It seems like the last couple though, right? Harmon's was wet, and then last year, of course, Royal Troon was nasty. We need a dry firm. Oh, we had one when Cam Smith won, right? That was super like drought conditions.
Can I throw this out here? I hate the British Open at St. Andrews. I think it sucks now.
It is probably the number one venue on the PGA Tour or any other tour that is time has passed it by.
It needs the rollback. Like if you want to put rollback into place, put it into place there, because it was not fun to watch it when half the field was driving greens.
Yeah, they need either that or they need to be able to book book Mother Nature that week to make it super nasty. Which then kind of says, is it who's winning this week, luck or the best player, that sort of thing.
Where did Molinari win? That was the best Open I can remember in recent history.
Oh, Carnoustie over Tiger. Yeah,
over Tiger, over Kisner, Xander, Rose, Pepperell was very much into the mix that week too. Like that came down to the wire. That was wet, but not too wet, and it just played hard. Like you had to make shots.
Yeah. It's probably the hardest course in the Rota, right? Carnoustie, the nickname Carnasty, right? That's the Van de Velde one. Where that late par 3, they were all hitting driver the last day into the green, like tagging drivers with modern technology. Yeah, Carnoustie's not a pleasant place to play golf. Certainly not.
It made for great viewing like that. Those are the open courses that I really want to see. I guess they're not going to go back to Turnberry until Trump sells it. So
yeah, they're not going to go there. Although Oakmont's going to be really good this year, Pat. That's a special place, and it's really hard. Really hard.
Lowry, man.
Lowry at Oakmont, huh?
Lowry had it last time at Oakmont, and DJ just beat him.
Lowry. Man.
We're going to do a master, a majors
All right.
preview show soon once I get back from vacation. But I've taken up way too much of your time. Can you please tell everyone where they can check out your work? Because you're doing stuff every day. You're out on the course. You're at TGL. You're a great source of information, and people should really take advantage of that.
Well, if you want, folks, please just come see me at Read the Line. ReadTheLine.com. You can subscribe for free. You can get premium access to what I see on site when I'm out on the road, my PGA eyes, checking things out. I cover TGL, the LPGA, if you want to bet it. We do quite well there, actually, and the PGA Tour. So come see me at Read the Line. You could follow it on all social channels, too. We love ourselves some TikTok videos if your attention span is about as long as mine. So please come enjoy that, and thanks for listening to Pat and I. It's the best.
Yeah, well, if they're going to follow you on TikTok because they have short attention spans, I don't think that they made it to this part of the show.
Fair enough. Touche, my friend. Touche.
Well, everyone remember to leave your Masters winner in the comment section or as a review on Spotify and Apple. Sub to the channel, smash a like, sub to the newsletter on Substack. I'm doing a live show June 7th in Toronto, and tickets will go on sale through there. That'll be the first look if you want to get your tickets right away. But other than that, you have yourself a great week, and I shall see you next time.
Pat Mayo experience! Experience!